What's going on? This is Greg, and welcome to this week's real estate deal breakdown. I got a really good case study today on a wholesale deal in Washington, and there are a lot of nuggets that you can learn from this. So I'm really excited to deliver it to you. So if you're not familiar with me, my name is Greg. I've been a full-time real estate investor now for a decade. And the point of these videos and podcasts I put out are to share with you lessons that I've learned myself so you can benefit from them and you can learn from the mistakes that I've made. So if you get value from this and you're watching on YouTube, if you could subscribe to my channel and like the video, that will be great. You'll get notified anytime we have more content that comes out. So let's get into it. This was a property out in Thurston County, Washington, which is right near Olympia. The way that I found the lead was from a JV person on Instagram. Shout out to a longtime friend, James Hawk. So he reached out to me, said, hey, I got this property in Yelm. Would you want to buy it? I ran the numbers as a flip. I didn't really like the numbers as a flip. I didn't really like the location as a flip, for me at least. I said, hey, I'll tell you what, I could probably get you, as much money as possible for this on a wholesale. We can like JV it and we can figure something out. He's like, absolutely, I'd love to do that. That way you could just work on the dispo and, I could just kind of move on and do more deals. I said, let's do it. So we agreed to JV on this thing. So what ended up happening here, there's a lot of nuggets here. I'm going to get into it now. When we first got the property in contract, I put it out to my email list and had a ton of interest. There was this one guy, and he was extremely persistent to buy the property. He was begging me for it. And I've never worked with this person before. I said, okay, listen, if you're ready to go and you're 100% set, you can put your earnest money in tomorrow. I'll sell you the property. He's like, okay, good. So we signed the assignment agreement and he puts the earnest money into title. Now, here's the key with wholesaling. You need to make your assignment contract in your favor as the wholesaler. If you have some vanilla assignment contract that doesn't protect you as the seller in this case, because when you're wholesaling and you're selling to a buyer, you are the seller, and obviously the buyer's the buyer. If the contract doesn't protect you and benefit you, it's really not going to work out in your favor if something goes wrong. Spoiler alert. So I had him sign my assignment contract that is locked and loaded in my favor. And it's obviously in the buyer's favor too. It basically keeps the buyer honest and it doesn't let them screw you over. That's what this contract does in a nutshell. So he signs that. He puts the deposit into escrow. It was $10,000. And, anytime you're doing that, the buyer knows that if they don't perform on the assignment agreement, they're losing their deposit. And people think, this is the key, people think that if they have a vanilla contract that just says the buyer's deposit's 10 grand, they think that if the buyer doesn't close, they're automatically getting the 10 grand or whatever you negotiate the deposit to be. Now, that's not true. In Washington, unless you have specific language in your contract, and by the way, I'm not an attorney giving you legal advice, unless you have specific language in there, the buyer has to sign off on letting their earnest money get forfeited. But if you put in your contract special language that says the buyer's losing their deposit automatically, and they're acknowledging that their deposit is at risk the second they put it down, assuming title's clear, you don't have to have the buyer sign anything. They're automatically losing their deposit. So that is a spoiler alert. So he puts his deposit in. We're ready to go. We get everything ready for the closing. Now, we're literally at the closing virtually, and the buyer sends me a text and says, hey, I can't buy this house anymore. This is the day of closing. I can't buy the house anymore. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't buy the house? He's like, I can't do this anymore. I can't get it done. I'm like, okay, so you're just going to walk? He's like, yep, I'm just going to walk. And now I didn't scream at him. I didn't yell at him. I didn't go crazy. I said, that's understandable. It is what it is. I obviously can't control you buying this house. Just so you know, your deposit is going to be forfeited, as per the contract says. And it is what it is. So we agreed to just, hang up the phone and that was it. The buyer officially didn't buy the house because my contract says in there, if the buyer cancels to no fault of the seller, the earnest money is going to be rewarded to the seller in this case, which is me. No questions asked. It literally says in the contract, the earnest money is automatically forfeited, which is instructions for escrow to give me the deposit immediately, which is what happened. And then right below that in my contract, it says, also, if the buyer defaults to no fault of the seller, assuming title is clear, the seller in this case can automatically sell the property to somebody else. The assignment agreement between the first buyer and the seller is terminated if the buyer doesn't perform. So because that contract is very in my favor, I went out, I found another buyer for a little bit less money. However, I still kept that first buyer's deposit. So when it was all said and done, this was a legit buyer who actually ironically worked with the title company a lot. So I knew he was legit and he was good to go. He put his deposit in. We signed a new assignment agreement that was the same one as the one that I signed with the other buyer, but I knew this guy wasn't going to flake out on me. And out in Washington, a couple of weeks ago, there was a ton of rain. Like it was raining like crazy here. It was like pouring out, flooding areas, trees falling down. And ironically, a tree fell on this freaking house. So what ended up happening was we had to take a little bit of the haircut as the wholesaler, and we took $2,500 off our fee. And then the seller actually was cool, and he said, "I'll give up $2,500 because it was about $7,500 worth of damage." So we got everything modified and rectified. We ended up getting the deal closed. The buyer actually performed, and we made $8,500 on the assignment fee the second time around. And then on the first deal, the one that didn't work out, we made 10 grand, right? So it was an 18.5 total profit. So what are some lessons you can learn from this? Because despite the spread not being that big, this was a really fulfilling deal to do because we had to overcome a lot of barriers to get it to the finish line. And sometimes the deals that you have to work hard for are very rewarding emotionally, even though you might not make, big spreads on every deal. So lesson number one, and you probably realized it by now, have contracts that are in your favor. If you are the seller or the buyer, right? Especially if you're the seller, have contracts in your favor. If you're wholesaling houses, obviously run this by your lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice. Get contracts that say, if the buyer doesn't perform to no fault of your own, the earnest money is automatically forfeited with no mutual consent. Also, you got to put language in there that if the buyer doesn't perform to no fault of your own, you're entitled to automatically resell the property past the closing date, right? So you don't have to worry about, the buyer trying to tie your property up with a list pendants or something like that. So that's lesson number one. Lesson number two here, you need to understand your local market and have a good list of investors if you're assigning properties. Now, if I was some nationwide wholesaler, I would not have been able to resell this property in an hour, right? But because I'm local to a few different areas, even though that's counterintuitive, but I'm only in 3 areas versus 30, I have good databases of buyers. So I was able to resell this property within an hour because I know a lot of people here and I understand this market, right? And I know the supply and demand situation out here in Washington. So that's lesson number two. Have a good buyers list. And don't spend your whole day building a buyers list. And I've got into that in other videos. But when you do wholesale deals and you're moving and shaking in any market, you're going to organically build up a buyer's list of serious investors so you could use that as an asset in your business. Lesson number three here. Sometimes the hardest deals to close with the most amount of obstacles are the most fulfilling, right? This one was an 18.5 profit that I split with James 50-50. So I made about 9 and a hook. Now, that's not a huge spread, certainly better than a sharp stick in the eye. And it was a free deal for me because I didn't have to spend any money on marketing for it. But the fulfillment I got from closing it, despite the tree falling on the house, despite the first buyer flaking, and despite some other obstacles with the property, it felt amazing. So sometimes the hardest deals that you do are going to feel the best when you actually close them because it makes you realize at the end of the day, you get paid in direct proportion to your ability to solve problems. Your income is in direct correlation to your ability to solve problems in your business, right? So if you're a good problem solver in your business, you're going to make a lot of money. We had a problem. Buyer flaked out. Solved the problem. Good contract. Another buyer had a problem. Tree fell on the house. Solved the problem. I mean, there's another story in this one where they wouldn't let me in the property because it's a gated community. So I ended up finding the neighbor to take pictures of the property so we could get an assessment on it. Anyway, solving problems gets you fulfilled. That's the takeaway. So that is this property out in Yelm. It was a very exciting property to close. And there's a lot of nuggets from there. I hope you learned some lessons like having good contracts in your favor, having a good buyer's list, and understanding that the harder deals to close are the most fulfilling most of the time. Now, that is a property in Yelm. So if you are in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State and you have a house you want to wholesale to me or wholesale with me, just like this one, guess what? I would love to work with you, partner with you, do more business with you. Send me an email, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com, or you can send me an Instagram DM @grego37, and I'll see you on the next REI deal breakdown.